Imagine working a full-time job, doing everything right, paying your bills, cutting back on luxuries, trying to get ahead, and still knowing that one small emergency could derail everything. This isn't a hypothetical, it's reality for most Americans. According to the latest data from the Federal Reserve, nearly 40% of U.S. adults say they wouldn't be able to cover a $400 unexpected expense without borrowing money or selling something. That number jumps even higher when you account for inflation-adjusted costs in 2025. Think about what that means. One flat tire, one medical copay, one missed paycheck could send an otherwise responsible household into a spiral of debt. In the wealthiest country in the world, most families are living one bad day away from financial instability. That's not alarmist, that's math. The personal savings rate in the US, which once peaked at over 30% during the early pandemic stimulus period, has now plummeted back to around 3.6%, one of the lowest levels in recent history. In simple terms, Americans are saving less now than they did during the 2008 financial crisis. Meanwhile, the cost of living has exploded. Groceries are up more than 25% over the last 4 years. Rents in many cities have doubled in a decade. Healthcare premiums, deductibles, and out-of-pocket expenses have climbed steadily, outpacing wages at every step. A report from Bankrate revealed that 56% of Americans can't cover a $1,000 emergency expense with savings. For Millennials and Gen Z, the numbers are even worse. More than 70% of younger adults report having little to no emergency cushion at all. And yet, household debt continues to rise, now topping over $17.7 trillion, with credit card balances alone surpassing $1.3 trillion. Average APRs are at record highs, over 20%, meaning that borrowing to cover an emergency can easily turn into a long-term trap. Here's where it gets even more concerning. The average American household has only about $5,300 in total savings. But that figure is skewed by higher earners. If you remove the top 10% of savers, most people have less than $1,000 saved. It's not just a budgeting issue, it's an income issue. Real wages after inflation have been mostly stagnant over the last 2 decades. The Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that while productivity has increased, median wages have not kept pace. In other words, people are working harder, but not earning more. At the same time, essential expenses, housing, childcare, transportation, medical costs, have risen dramatically. You might be wondering, if people know they're this vulnerable, why aren't they saving more? It's not about willpower, it's about margin. The economic system increasingly leaves little room for error. According to Pew Research, nearly 1 in 3 adults say they struggle to pay their monthly bills. You can't save what's already gone. And the pressure isn't just financial, it's psychological. A survey by the American Psychological Association found that 65% of Americans cite money as a significant source of stress. Financial instability isn't just a budgeting problem, it's a public health issue. It impacts sleep, relationships, decision-making, and mental health. Now here's a scenario. Imagine your paycheck gets delayed by 3 days. For millions of Americans, that's not an inconvenience. It's a crisis. Late rent, overdraft fees, missed minimum payments. A 3-day delay can have a domino effect that takes months to undo. And the system isn't built to help, it's built to profit. Overdraft fees, credit card interest, and payday loans generated billions in revenue for banks and lenders last year, most of it extracted from households already living on the edge. Financial institutions have every incentive to keep people hovering near zero, not because they're evil, but because the model is profitable. The more people borrow to survive, the more interest they pay, and the cycle continues. But let's zoom out. This isn't just about individual households, it's a macroeconomic risk. When most of the population is financially fragile, the economy becomes brittle. One downturn, one pandemic, one housing crash, one surge in unemployment can trigger a ripple effect that spreads fast. People cut spending, businesses lose revenue, layoffs begin. And without savings, there's no buffer to slow the spiral. It's exactly what happened in 2008. And while protections were added after that crisis, we're now facing a different kind of risk. Not just too much borrowing, but too little resilience. In fact, the FDIC recently warned that the erosion of consumer savings poses a significant threat to regional banks and lending institutions. Here's a fact that might surprise you. The bottom 50% of Americans by wealth now collectively hold just 2.5% of the country's net worth. Meanwhile, the top 1% control over 30%. That gap isn't just a statistic, it's a reflection of how vulnerable most households are. Wealth inequality doesn't just impact social mobility, it directly affects financial preparedness. If one side of the population has no cushion and the other has more than they can spend in a lifetime, the average doesn't matter. Emergencies don't care about averages. So, what would happen if another shock hit the system? Not a massive recession, just a modest downturn, a rise in unemployment, a dip in consumer demand. Without savings, millions would be unable to manage even brief disruptions. Rent would go unpaid, loans would default, the ripple effects would be fast and severe. Which brings us to an uncomfortable question. Is the real crisis already here? Not a headline-worthy crash, but a slow, invisible decline in household resilience, a hollowing out of the financial buffer that once allowed the middle class to feel secure. We tend to think of emergencies as rare events, but the truth is, they're regular, they're life. A child gets sick, a car breaks down, hours are cut at work. None of this is extraordinary. What's extraordinary is the fact that these common life events now threaten financial ruin for so many. Here's a pattern disruption worth thinking about. If you're one of the few with an emergency fund, you're the outlier, not the standard. And if you're not alone. You're the majority. And yet, most people feel ashamed about it, like it's a personal failure. But the numbers tell a different story. The structure of the modern American economy makes it incredibly difficult to build savings unless you're already ahead. In short, saving money is a privilege many don't have, and that's why this story matters. It's not about how to save tips or budgeting advice. It's about understanding the environment we're all operating in, because before you can fix a problem, you have to name it. And what we're seeing isn't just bad luck or poor choices, it's a systemic issue affecting tens of millions. The result is a population increasingly anxious, over-leveraged and underprepared. Not because they're lazy, but because the math of modern life just doesn't add up. If you're still watching, here's the part that gets real. This crisis doesn't make headlines because it doesn't happen all at once. It happens quietly in homes and bank accounts and sleepless nights. But over time, the damage accumulates. And one day, it's not just a savings crisis, it's a national reckoning. So here's the question I'll leave you with. If 60% of the country can't handle a small emergency, what happens when a big one hits? If that question got you thinking, then you're exactly who this channel is for. We break down economic realities that impact your everyday life using data, stories, and simple logic. So if you got value from this video, hit that like button to help the algorithm. Share it with more people. Subscribe if you want more content that cuts through the noise and delivers the truth behind the numbers. And drop a comment below. How much do you think a household needs saved to feel truly secure in today's America? Let's have a real conversation because this is too important to ignore. Thanks for watching.